Hey, coming up on your favorite podcast, we are back. The boys, Ryan, Zach, me, talking Super Bowl, and then also getting into some of the off-season storylines that we are looking to follow in the NFL as we kind of close the book on this 2020 NFL season that somehow started on time and somehow ended on time. Unbelievable. Hard to even think about. We'll talk about that. We'll probably talk about so many other things that are going on. We haven't been together in a couple weeks, so we got to hear about Zach's tremendous luck in Las Vegas. I can't wait to hear about that. And anything else that Ryan might have in front of us, I don't even know, man. We haven't had a chance to really speak. We've got so much to say. It's going to be a great podcast, so we hope you take a listen tonight. Should be great. It's Zach. It's Ryan. It's me. It's the pod. It's NFL stuff, and it's next. Enjoy. Hey, it's the Tim Anderson Podcast Show. I'm Tim. Actually, it's just Tim Anderson Podcast. I think I've dropped the show. I went all WWE on it and dropped a part of the name. The Tim Anderson Podcast, I'm Tim Anderson. Joined alongside for the NFL pod, my two NFL geniuses, the offensive line coach and the senator of the podcast, Ryan Nelson Kane.
Hi.
And the defensive coordinator / Vegas wise guy, Zach Neighbor.
How's it going?
Zach, let's start with you. You were in Party Town for the Super Bowl. You were in the city, the Sin City, if you will. How was it, first of all? And what was your experience?
It was a lot of fun. There was a good amount of people out there, not what you would normally see for a Super Bowl weekend, but definitely more than they've had in recent days. So it was a pretty good vibe out there.
Fantastic. And you came away, the word was, all I could receive was on your social media, you were fighting the time crunch to get to the airport because you were red hot at the craps table. Is that confirmed or denied?
I sat down, stood at the craps table for one last shot before I left. And when I walked up, there was one guy to throw and then me. And he threw 25 times before he crapped out. They keep track of it there. And then I was up, and I made a ton of money when he threw. And I'm like, okay, I'm just going to throw these one time here, and get on the plane. And I ended up throwing 35 times before I crapped out. So it was an amazing run to close the weekend, and I was already up. So it was a lot of fun.
Oh, I gotta learn. I've done Guys and Dolls 3 times as an actor, and I still don't know how to play craps. So I'm gonna have to figure that out. Somebody's gonna have to teach me. Ryan, you're a gambler. You know your craps.
I'm really not.
So you finished up for the weekend. Did you bet on the game? How much did you bet? What was your action?
So I only bet a little bit on the game. I did bet on the Chiefs and lost that. The main prop bet I hit, I had both teams to kick a 35-yard field goal or longer.
Okay.
And so
that's a good prop, actually. I like that one.
I was walking to the cashier to cash it when they called the offsides on the Chiefs and erased the first field goal for the Bucks. So I had to sweat that a little bit longer, but it cashed in the end. So I ended up losing a little bit of money on the Super Bowl, but the big story was my cousin. My cousin Jake. So he was my running buddy playing craps all weekend. And he's a single guy. He's 28. He's a lawyer. So he has no real obligations at home, right? He's got some money to throw around. And we started playing craps, and he was up big. And so the morning of the Super Bowl, he was up $800.
Good God.
And he took all $800 and put it on different various things for the Super Bowl. He bet a lot of long shots. I actually have some of his losers here.
Props here.
Successful 2-point conversion. He put $10 on the Chiefs to score 50 or more.
What?
Which would have paid out $230.
Oh my God.
He literally said, he's like, I bet on a bunch of long shot stuff to see what would come in. no touchdowns in the game. He bet $5 to win 2,500. Playoff Lenny to score the first touchdown of the game. There's all kinds of Tyler Johnson to score a touchdown. He had a bunch of losers, but he actually came out ahead in the game because he hit on some big ones. He did have the Bucks to win. He had the Bucks to win straight up. He had the Bucks to win against the spread. So those were two big wins. He won $100 on the coin toss. So he hit that one right out the gate. Before even kickoff, he had cashed. And then when it got real exciting was with about 5 minutes to go in the game, he walked over to my table and said, I don't want to jinx this, but I do have Mahomes to throw 0 touchdowns, and I have there to be a scoreless quarter. And so with 5 minutes to go, both of those were in play. But the Chiefs were starting to drive. And so they went down, and then they got a stop on one of those wild circus, sacks, and chase them all around and throws it away. And then Tom's got the ball back, and we're like, all right, Tom, like one stop. You need one first down. And, of course, they don't get it, and they punt it back. So we had to sweat it all the way down. And when that interception happened at the end, we went nuts because that sealed it for him. So he won. Let's see, I have the tickets here, or pictures of those tickets. The scoreless quarter, he bet $50 on it and won $300.
That's pretty good. That's a good day.
And the best part about that was when he pulled that ticket out when he came over to the table and talked on it, and he looked at it and he goes, "Yeah, it pays out $300. Looks like I bet $50." He goes, "Wait, I bet $50 on that? How drunk was I?" And then the Mahomes no touchdown was $20 down, and it paid out $300 as well. So, all in all, he ended up up 1,100 after the Super Bowl. So he made about $300 on the Super Bowl when you factored in everything he put in at the front end. He did hit a couple other cool prop bets, littler ones. He had, let's see here, the last play of the first half to be a quarterback rush. He bet $20 on that and it won $54. And Tyreek Hill's longest reception under 30 yards. Mahomes rushing over 26.5. So those were all kind of fun too. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. He then, we were back at the craps table later that night. So I don't know where he ended up because I left the day before them.
Okay.
But it sounds like he had a pretty solid run.
Hope he made it home. Let's always just say, hey, by the way, Ryan, this whole sportsbook thing sounds like zero fun in the state of Minnesota, doesn't it? I mean, doesn't it seem like just zero fun? Why would we ever want something like that here?
I have to be honest with you. There's nothing fun about this state. We are business first. We are all about making sure that we are pro family. That we are keeping gamblers in a good place where they're not tempted to go and dump all their money in it. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm getting word now. I'm getting word now that we do have casinos in this state and people can go gamble anyway. There's pull tabs up the road. We might as well have a sports book here too.
Thank you. Can we make some sense here, people in Minnesota? Can we get on the stick here? Can we figure this out?
Get some ideological consistency.
I was amazed at the number of people who bet on the coin toss.
Well, yeah. I mean, why wouldn't you? It's a 50-50 any way you slice it. Why wouldn't you bet it? Especially if you're getting.
The whole first quarter is pretty electric in Vegas for the Super Bowl because there are so many bets of like who will have the first reception, who will get the first down,
Jesus.
All these first. So the first quarter, every play it seems like someone's cheering because it's a big moment for them. I even had a point being scored in the first 6 minutes. That one didn't hit, but. So it was a lot of fun doing that. And then as the game went on, like it wasn't, it wasn't that great of a game.
No, it wasn't a great game.
But there's obviously a lot of intrigue there in that. I mean, in the last 5 minutes for us, obviously, we were having a great time.
Yeah, can we get this done, Minnesota? I mean, listen to Zach Nienaber's story here on the podcast. We can have that here. We can have that here. Come on, man. Oh, Jesus H. Okay, let's talk about the game itself for a few minutes, and then if we have more time late in the podcast, we'll go back to Zach for another great Vegas story, because Lord knows Zach's got many of them. I think he's had many great experiences. Every time he's gone to Vegas, something great's happened to him. So we'll hear more stories as we go. But Ryan, let's go to the game for a minute.
Sure.
Being an offensive line guy and us being Vikings fans, I feel like we got proved right here a little bit this weekend that for as great as Mahomes is, and for as much as you want to have an elite quarterback, you got to have O-line guys. And were you like me? When you saw Mike Remmers' picture come up at left tackle for the Chiefs, were you like, they're done? Like I was. I said it in the house. I'm like, oh, there's no way they're going to win. Mike Remmers is starting at left tackle. There's no way this works, right? So proof, offensive line is needed, yes?
Yeah, but I think that the story is bigger than the offensive line for Kansas City this weekend. I think that the bigger issue that they ran into was the receivers just being completely absent in this game. They didn't catch anything. They weren't in the right spot. Mahomes was running for his life because, and according to him post-game, they weren't running the routes in the right spot. Look, I think that you watch that game and you can have a bad day from your receivers and a good day from your offensive line, and you can be okay. You can have a bad day from your offensive line and an okay day from your receivers, and you're probably okay. But you can't have bad days from your receivers and your offensive line, and Patrick Mahomes is the only guy out there holding the ball. I mean, you think about those two just miracle throws that he made. The one to the left where he's rolling out and falling out of bounds and throws it into the end zone, and I think was it Hill that had a chance at catching that,
yep,
and couldn't bring it in. You had the next play where he's horizontal to the ground and just whips it like a shortstop diving for the ball and just catching it midair and throwing it to first base, 30 yards down the field and bounces off the guy's face mask. Like just a horrendous showing from the Chiefs wide receivers and even the tight end. Like Travis Kelce dropped, I think, 2 balls in that game that you don't normally see him drop. And I don't know what the difference was. I don't know what the problem was, but yeah, the offensive line was injured, and they fell apart completely, and that Bucs defense is no joke. They have a great pass rush. They blitzed all night, basically unattended. But at the same time, it's the Kansas City Chiefs, and we've seen them beat those defenses before. We saw them beat the Bucs before when they were healthy and when their receivers were catching the ball. The problem is you got none of those things this weekend. It was just Pat Mahomes. I would say this is less of a comparison to the Minnesota Vikings and more of a comparison to the Houston Texans, where you have no receivers, no offensive line protection, and Desean Watson's just running for his life trying to make plays. And you lose those games. There's a reason that they would have had the number 3 overall pick this year, because they had nothing around Desean Watson. In the Super Bowl against one of the best defenses in the NFL, up against greatness and Tom Brady on the other side, they're going to score. Tampa Bay dominated the trench, and Kansas City couldn't answer on the back end, even when the ball got out of Patrick Mahomes' hands.
I also thought that Andy Reid didn't have his best game.
No, you're right.
And there were 2 big moments. I'll get back to Andy Reid in a moment. The first one was when they did line up offsides on the field goal, right? Because that took it from, instead of being 10-3, it went to 14-3. And the second big moment was going into half. It's 14-6. The Bucs got the ball on the 37 with like 27 seconds left. And Kansas City calls a timeout to make them convert a 3rd and 1. And they do, and then the Bucs go down and score and make it's 21-6 and it's game over. And I just don't understand the thinking there, because even if you get the stop and you call another timeout, you're going to get the ball on your own 10 with 20 seconds to go in the half, and you haven't moved the ball all half. Right? Like, they should have let Tampa run it out, because Tampa was content to run it out before the timeout. get to the locker room at 14-6 and regroup. And I mean, that's another thing too. They didn't really change. I mean, what were the halftime adjustments?
You really didn't see many.
Yeah, and so I think that was, it was not Andy Reid's best game.
Yeah, and there's so much that goes into that. We can talk a little bit more. I mean, if that is a factor, the whole coaching situation with his son 2 days prior. You don't want to ever throw those in as distractions, or have distractions like that actually move into why the Chiefs might have lost the game. But I mean, it's human nature to suggest that. I don't think it's wrong to suggest that, his son is having a major issue. Addiction is clearly a problem in the family. We've seen this play out before. It's a couple days before a huge game, and it's human nature to think that your mind may not be 100% on football in that moment. I don't think Andy Reid will use that as an excuse, and I don't expect him to do so. But I just think that it was a perfect storm that worked against the Chiefs in this game, and that's where the Bucs got the advantage.
No, I think you're totally right. I really do. I mean, look, and this isn't to say he played a perfect game, but you can't watch that game, and this is one of those games that we talk about that you can't blame the quarterback. That Patrick Mahomes was playing superhero football, and the team around him just didn't come to play. And you have that sometimes. I mean, we've seen that with great quarterbacks time and time again, but I cannot get out of my head that throw where he is parallel to the ground and he still launches it on target for 30 yards.
Yeah, it was incredible.
I can't get rid of it. I can't escape it.
It was an incredible play.
I've never seen anything like it. And if the receiver catches the ball and they're in the end zone, I mean that's got to be one of the best plays in Super Bowl history, right? If he catches that ball, that's history.
It's a highlight reel play for sure. And it might even be a game changer because stuff like that is demoralizing, deflating when you hit plays like that. And could have changed the entire complexion of the game. Mahomes ran for, they calculated, 400 yards between his parallel, his 25-step drops and his moving from side to side.
500, 497.
497. I mean,
it's just obscene. Look, there's words escape me when you're trying to talk about the games that Patrick Mahomes played on Sunday. I just thought he was a master of his craft, and it's unfortunate because you're right. It would have changed the game, but you felt like there were about 6 of those moments, right? 6 or 7 of those moments in that game where you thought that was it. Like if they would have gotten that would have turned it around. And there were a couple of times where you felt like they got to stop there. This feels like the spot where Kansas City could start to come back. They're going to find some momentum here, and they just never did. It just never materialized. And
Zach, you are obviously a big defensive guy. How much credit is this? We've talked a little bit about Kansas City's woes. Like Ryan has kind of pointed those out eloquently: receivers, offensive line, coaching. You've talked about that. How much of this, though, is Tampa Bay's defense and your old adage? Because you always talk about, hey, it's still always about the defenses. How much of it is Tampa's defense that gets the credit here?
I think you have to give a lot of credit to the defense. The defensive line was relentless, and they got home with just 4 guys over and over and over again. And you saw they played too high most of the game. And I think they said it was the most – I can't remember if it was the most that anyone had played in the playoffs or the most that the Chiefs had seen all year. But they bracketed Hill. Kelsey Kelsey had over 100 yards, but he got a lot of those towards the end in garbage time. Early in the game, they kept having Kelsey chipping and helping, and I thought that was a mistake. I think if you need to bring in an extra blocker to help your tackle, like I don't want it to be Travis Kelsey. Like, take one of your other wide receivers off the field, bring in an extra tight end, and let Kelsey do his thing in the pass route. So the defense was phenomenal. It was a good scheme. They obviously played with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. You saw that with Winfield after the big stop at the end. When he threw up the peace sign, he was definitely saving that one all game long. So it was fun to watch, right? Like I told you it was, score one for the defenses, It doesn't happen often in those big games, but it's happened a couple times now in the last few years, right? The Rams were absolutely handled by the Patriots a couple years ago, and then we saw it again this year. So 2 of the last 3, at least, I think you got to give to the defense.
Would you say that this defensive performance puts Todd Bowles on the short list for head coaching positions?
I don't know if it puts him on the short list, simply because we saw it once and it didn't go great, and there doesn't seem to be a ton of guys getting second chances right now. The inclination is to go with super young, but I do think if the NFL changed their hiring policies and said you can't interview and you can't do anything until the Super Bowl is over,
which they've talked about,
right? You would have seen Bowles get more interviews and looks than he got otherwise. Right?
I think you'd probably see the same thing with Leftwich, yeah.
Yeah, I think Leftwich may have got. I mean, he probably would have had at least one interview, right?
Yeah.
So he might have interviewed somewhere. I don't know that means either of them get a job, but they're more in the conversation. And so now next year, they're probably on your list, but they're it's going to be a prove it year. They're going to have to do it again.
It's also kind of interesting it goes back to the whole 2 weeks thing too, right? And I still thought the advantage of being at home and the fact that they got to be in their houses for 2 weeks and the fact that they got to practice at their practice facilities and their locker rooms and all of that stuff, I really did think that was an advantage. And it feels like that if you give a good defensive coordinator 2 weeks to figure out, they'll figure out anybody. It doesn't matter how great the offense is. It seems like if you give a coordinator more time, that is always an advantage for a good defensive coordinator, right?
Yeah, I think defenses have that advantage. Defenses can spend more time looking at things. They can prepare for more. They can have their checks in line, right? Because that's the big thing. That's the advantage for offense, right? Offense knows what they're doing ahead of time. The offense knows where they're going to be, how they're going to line up, and the defense's job is to react. And so, the offense has the element of surprise where they can come out in things you haven't seen before that you maybe didn't prepare for. But in 2 weeks, it gives you a lot of time to prepare for those things.
And especially since they played once before, too. I think that plays a role in it, too. And it's kind of interesting that they played, and basically from the second half of that Chiefs game on, the Bucs didn't lose. The Bucs were the better, they won 9 straight games, Ryan. That's pretty, I guess I have to apologize to Bruce Arians and Byron Leftwich and everybody, do I not?
I mean, I think that you do. I've been on the Bruce Arians train for a little while, as you know.
Yes, you have.
I think he's a pretty good coach.
Yep.
I don't think he's a perfect coach by any stretch. I don't think there is a perfect coach, but he does good things, and that's going to bear out over time. Now, the discipline issues were definitely a concern this year. They had some discipline issues on defense. We knew that to be true. And they got it under control. And I think that it's a testament to good coaching over the course of a season that what you see in week 6 might not be what ends up happening.
Well, I think the big moment for them was after that Chiefs loss, they had their bye.
Yeah.
Right? So they didn't have their bye till week 13. And if you are in the mix, you can hang on for the first 12 weeks and then get that late bye. I think it's such a huge advantage. And so they were able to use that and regroup and self-scout a little bit. And, I mean, they said they threw out a lot of things from the playbook from the first 12 weeks after they were able to go in and do some of those, self-scouting things and looking back. And that made them so much better down the stretch.
And it helps to have number 12 back there who could be a leader who says, hey, I've been here before. I know where to go. Just listen to me. Get on my back. Here's what we do. I think that's a huge locker room culture thing. And this is how you build a dynasty, right? You have a young team with young guys who can become leaders like Winfield, like Johnson, like Vita Vea on that defensive line. And you establish a culture with a guy like Tom Brady that comes in, doesn't need to be there forever, But you establish those norms, you establish those rhythms, those championship things that you learn how to do. That's the long-term effect of signing a guy like Brady, even at the end of his career.
I'm sorry, just not to backtrack to Vegas here, but you brought up Vita Vea and it made me think of this. Jake had him at 50-1 to score a touchdown.
Oh no!
Which is only interesting and of note in that he lined up at fullback.
Yeah, he did.
1 from the 1.
Oh.
So all of a sudden, your defensive guy who's a super long shot, I'm like, my God, what if they give it to him here? And then he went in motion, and I'm like, okay, he's not getting the ball. But like there's a moment there where we all kind of like went, wait, maybe? He had him, Sue, and Winfield were his 3 defensive guys he was hoping for a touchdown from.
You almost got it with Winfield. That pick looked like he could have made it.
Yeah. Well, his comment before the game was, if Winfield scores a touchdown, we're all going to the strip club and I'm buying. And I jokingly, I hate the Gophers. And I jokingly said to him, I'm like, if he scores and we're going, I'm like, I will be in the sports book rowing the boat with everyone.
I would have paid money to see it. That's all I know is I would have thoroughly enjoyed that. No question about it. It's interesting. We'll get to. I want to talk about Brady's kind of influence / legacy, but how much say does? I mean, people have kind of talked about this, and it's certainly been the impetus for guys like Watson wanting more say. Russell Wilson just came out this week saying he'd like more input in the organization. Is it overstating to think that Brady basically said, "Give me Antonio Brown. I'll take care of him. I'll keep him in check. Give him to me." That seems to be the perception that's out there. But they also signed some guys that were of questionable character, right? Ndamukong Suh, and yet it all seemed like it was simpatico from the beginning. That it worked out. I don't know, Ryan. Is Tom getting too much credit for this stuff, or is this legitimate?
Look, again, I think it's a locker room culture thing, right? It's one thing for Desean Watson, who I think is a very talented quarterback, to stand up and say, I want some say on the roster, or to be offered say on the roster. It's another for, 10 Super Bowls, 7 rings, to stand up and say, I know what it takes to win. I know what we need to win. Here's my guy. Let's go get him. I'll keep him in check. And then you have that guy in your locker room and the guys that see that and trying to emulate his energy and the things that he's doing in the locker room, week to week, day to day, seeing guys like Sue come in and you're kind of held in check by that a little bit, right? Like, yeah, the coach is allowed to take the reins off a little bit. The coach isn't all that there is anymore. You've got a built-in coach at the quarterback position who can help establish that culture. And if in a situation like that, with a guy who has been there, with a guy who knows what he's doing, I mean, at some point, it's the team's way or the highway, and the team's way becomes his way a little bit. And you kind of saw that as the stories about the relationship between Arians and Brady kind of fizzled away, and they kind of took off and became a really good team. That's culture. That's building a culture. That's settling in. And you didn't hear a peep out of Ndamukong Suh this year. He didn't get flagged all that much this year. It's because you built a culture in the locker room.
I was I just watching some of the parade footage today and watching him shot put the Lombardi Trophy from one boat to the other for Gronkowski. You get the vibe that Tom really enjoyed this one almost more than some of these Patriot ones. I'm not saying he doesn't appreciate those Patriot ones, but there was something about him going to another place and winning it. And you feel like he doesn't have to necessarily share this one with Bill, or that this was maybe a gotcha moment. I don't know. I got a feeling Tom's got a little FU to him, right? I mean, it just feels like Tom enjoyed this one differently than maybe others. Is that an oversimplification, Zach? Do you think I'm wrong on this one, or what do you think?
Well, he definitely enjoyed himself today on the boat ride. He was stumbling around there at one point. And, I love how, too, everybody just got up in arms about it. It's like, man, we got nothing else to be offended by today, so we're going to be upset that Tom Brady is having a few beverages after winning a 7th Super Bowl. And it probably only takes him, one Mike's Hard Lemonade to get drunk with what he eats. The way he takes care of his body. So
Gronk's like, hang on, Tom's 2 Zimas in, and he's having all kinds of trouble standing up here. This is not going to work for us. But
did you see him? He threw the trophy.
That's what I'm saying. He shot-putted the damn trophy from one boat to the other. Ryan, did you see this?
Of course I saw it.
This is unbelievable.
When you've got 6 others,
Tampa don't have 6 others. Are you kidding me? They'd probably have to go. Raj could make them another one. I'm pretty sure they had to if that thing fell in the ocean.
Something tells me they're not exactly hurting for money over at Tiffany's making those things.
Could you imagine somebody jumping into the water going like, I'm jumping to the bottom of the ocean here, the Gulf or wherever this is, and I'm fishing that out. Like that's coming with me, that Lombardi trophy.
So, somebody would. Somebody would. Probably on the NFL's dime. But I think, circling back to the question of, how Tom reacts to winning without being on the Patriots. Look, this is kind of his first Super Bowl away from the Patriot way. You know what I mean? That kind of buttoned up, very professional, almost corporate football. And he's out there with his friend Gronk, and they're throwing the ball around and having fun. They won a Super Bowl having fun. This is like a retirement party.
It was just cool. For me as a Brady guy, it's just further validation, obviously. I mean, he didn't have to win another one, but the fact that he did win another one is kind of, to me, it's another thing that separates him from everybody else. And I think Simmons brought this up, right? I think I heard him say, like, had he won this, or even Romo, actually it was Romo at the end of the Super Bowl, that if Mahomes won this and it was 6-2, the conversation would be there that maybe Mahomes can overtake Brady one day and be the greatest. But a lot of people feel like now that he's lost an AFC title game to Brady and a Super Bowl to Brady, and Brady's got 7 and Mahomes has 1, that conversation's over. Like, Mahomes can be great. Mahomes is going to be awesome and have a Hall of Fame career, but he's going to be Phil Mickelson to Tiger Woods this entire time, I think, right? And that's kind of a tough spot. You wonder what this does to Mahomes going forward, but I think for Tom's legacy, this was not needed, but certainly one that the Tom fans like myself really, really appreciate. I don't know, but what do you think of Romo's assessment?
Well, I'm sure you're going to hear some more about it too, but he's now in the same spot that Russell Wilson was. Win the Super Bowl in year 2, lose the Super Bowl in year 3 to Tom. And guess what? Russ hasn't been back. Russ hasn't even played in an NFC title game since. So, if Mahomes were to miss the title game the next 6 years, like, what would we all think?
I think that, and I don't mean to cut you off on that, but I think it's important to note, too, that the Seahawks not getting back was largely an organizational failure. We haven't really said that Russell Wilson's the problem in Seattle. And
but I don't think we've said that Russ is the problem in Seattle. We haven't said that, Mahomes is the problem in Kansas City. But, like, things get more difficult, right? You're going to start – contracts are going to come up. It's hard to stay at the top for as long as some of these guys would like to, or we'd think they would. And I think it kind of goes back to the idea of, like, this is why Russ is unhappy, right? Like, right, we would all be shocked if Mahomes doesn't get back to a AFC title game in the next 6 years. But that's the same thing that Wilson has done.
Yeah,
I would argue the NFC is tougher too. I think that there's a lot of stiff competition at the top with Green Bay and New Orleans, how they've been the last couple of years. Minnesota's been up and down. Philadelphia's been there. It's pretty stiff. Where the AFC, I mean, it's pretty predictable the last couple of years. Outside of New England this year really falling off the cliff with Tom leaving. You had Baltimore, Pittsburgh, you had Kansas City, you had Denver when when their defense was solid. The one of the teams from the AFC South seems to bubble every year, but they're never quite there. And now Buffalo kind of takes over in the East. So it's been fairly predictable out of the AFC, but the NFC has been a depth of teams that can compete with each other. I'm not making excuses for Russ, and I'm not saying that you're not going to see it out of Kansas City. I just think that there's a lot that goes into it.
To your point, Ryan, the NFC is kind of at a crossroads because, I was talking about this earlier this week with somebody. If you look at the balance of power, I think this is going to swing heavy to the AFC really soon. And all you have to do is just look at who the quarterbacks are and their age. It's like the old guard in the NFC, right, with Rodgers and Breeze and Brady and Wilson. And you just going down Stafford, Matt Ryan, older guys that play a different kind of football. Then you go to the AFC and you look at what's there. Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Desean Watson. And you start going down the line there and you're like, man, there's the young, mobile, athletic QB in the AFC versus the older, more traditional QBs in the NFC. And you just feel like that balance of power, this was like the last stand, right? I feel like this is like the old guard's last stand. And, I think the balance of power shifts hard here in the next few years, and maybe that scares guys like Russell Wilson. What do you think?
Well, I think that I don't know that it scares them. I think that it's a new challenge. It kind of makes the NFC the Wild West a little bit. And unfortunately, it's the bigger issue is that the young guard in the NFC really hasn't stepped up. You thought it was going to be Carson Wentz. You thought that he could step up and be that guy. You kind of thought that Jameis Winston might take a step at some point when Arians took over, and now Tom Brady's the quarterback there. You thought that maybe Teddy Bridgewater could be the guy in Carolina. He's had a bad couple of years. Washington drafts a quarterback in Dwayne Haskins. He kind of falls apart. Daniel Jones doesn't look like a great quarterback in New York. Dak Prescott's up and down in Dallas. Minnesota can't put anything together with Kirk Cousins. This kind of, Jimmy Garoppolo can't do anything in San Francisco. He's on his way out. You look around, and the young guard in the NFC really hasn't put anything together.
Yeah, and they just traded Jared Goff in L.A. So,
right.
It just feels like it feels like the NFC is going to be fishing for, they're the teams that are going to be looking like the AFC was a few years ago, just looking for the young, mobile next guy. It feels like you have to be able to move and you have to be able to throw. That seems to be the modern model as we go forward. Final thoughts on the Super Bowl before we kind of move to some offseason stuff, Zach? Anything that you want to touch on as far as Tom, coaching, et cetera?
It was, like I said, it was kind of a lackluster game. It was shocking to see the Chiefs not score a touchdown.
Yeah, I agree.
But I think that whole Vegas atmosphere changed it for me. It was a lot of fun.
Hey, let's go to some offseason storylines because it's been a couple weeks since we've talked. Since we last left, Ryan, Stafford gets dealt to L.A. for a big haul, huge haul for the Lions. Really like the Lions. This trade for the Lions, I think, is great. Well, what does this trade say about Stafford, Goff, the Lions, and the Rams, all of that stuff? We'll hear from you first, then go to Zach.
Look, I think the Stafford trade is really just a product of Detroit trying to get as much as they can back for Stafford. It's clear that they're planning on building longer term than they thought that they would, and Stafford doesn't fit that. He clearly wanted out, and LA's a good spot for him. I think that he offers LA's offense a better, higher ceiling than Goff ever could. I think he offers the opportunity for the head coach to play a little bit more creatively with a quarterback who knows a little bit more about the game than Jared Goff has demonstrated that he does. And it also gives Goff a chance to play with a fresh start. I don't think that it's going to go super great for him in Detroit. I don't think there's much of a team around him, especially if Kenny Golladay leaves. And that defense really hasn't improved much over the course of the offseason to this point. Obviously, that has a long time to change. We've got a draft yet. But the situation for Goff gets exponentially worse, and the situation for Stafford gets exponentially better. I think it's a good trade for both teams. I don't necessarily think it's a good trade for both players.
It's the breakup here with Goff and the Rams and McVay. It's kind of juicy. It
seems that way.
It seemed to go south really fast.
Yeah, it did.
And it'll be interesting because it seems like this is going to be more common now. We're going to see quarterbacks on the move. We're going to see teams willing to take a shot, to add players. And I don't know. I in the end, I think it's better for the league. They do play each other next year, so that'll be kind of fun.
I liked this trade for Detroit. I felt like they got $1.25 on the dollar back, to get 2 first-round picks, and a starting quarterback. Like, people can rip Jared Goff if they want. The guy's 2 years removed from playing in the Super Bowl. I think Jared Goff's a starter in this league, and the fact that they got a ready-made guy back in return plus 2 first-round picks, I mean, they couldn't have done any better. And I think in doing that, they sort of made the Watson market unachievable. Like, or if it's not unachievable, it's going to be really difficult for a team to get there with the salary cap hit that's out there and all the picks that they're going to have to satisfy Houston to take that hit. And it also makes the Carson Wentz deal a little stickier too. I just think like the Lions have totally changed the market as far as what you can get, even for a 32-year-old quarterback who hasn't won a playoff game. I know people love Stafford, but it's not like Stafford's been devoid of talent. It's not like there hasn't been anybody to throw to in Detroit. There has been. He's had talent there to play with. They haven't won playoff games. That's not all Stafford's fault. I understand that because I don't know if the coaching's been phenomenal. Although Caldwell, I don't think, was a bad coach. And Schwartz got him to the playoffs too. Patricia was a total disaster. But Stafford hasn't won a playoff game yet. And I think they're giving him I think that's a lot of value for a guy who I don't think either of us had in our top 10 for QBs last year.
No, I am not a big Stafford guy. Here's the interesting thing. That the division, it feels like, is getting worse.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, the Bears' issues are still abundant, right? And we're like, what, they're going to get Wentz to solve it? That doesn't seem to fix it. The Lions traded Stafford. They're not as good. So now we're at what? Packers and Vikings once again.
Yeah, and I think it's it's a clear Packers victory right now. I mean, obviously, we've got a full off season to go here, but I mean, I think you're right. In the North right now, it comes down to the Vikings and the Packers, and it's purely based on quarterback play at this point. They have the 2 best quarterbacks in the division right now.
Do you hate the nepotism for the Vikings? The fact that they just promoted Clint Kubiak and there's Adam Zimmer, who's a defensive coordinator. Do you feel like Zimmer is surrounding himself with just family friends? And do you think that was the right fit in that situation, or should they have been more aggressive and pursued an Anthony Lynn as an offensive coordinator, or gone out and found a different option out there, Ryan?
I had one specific person that I wanted for this job if it wasn't Clint Kubiak. I've been open about it. I've said it multiple times. I wanted Brian Hartline. I thought that he would have been a good out-of-the-box pick. It would have pulled him from a Power 5 conference. It would have been a good pick. However, Clint Kubiak's more than qualified to run this team. He's more than qualified to run this offense. And I think that the bigger story isn't so much Clint Kubiak becoming the OC, because you were going to have a new OC coming in anyway. It makes sense to have some schematic consistency in what you're doing. The bigger thing for me is the position coaching hires. I think that Keenan McCardell is a very, very, very good wide receivers coach.
That's what I've heard.
And you see that with the way that his receivers in Jacksonville and in LA have performed. Over the course of his coaching career, they have had rave reviews about him. They have said that he has helped them develop as wide receivers, and you're starting to hear that out of Jefferson and Thielen, that he's already reached out to them. He's already contacting them. He's already trying to help them find ways to grow. And this is what successful teams do: is they identify their points of strength and they double down on them. You see that with Green Bay with their quarterbacks. When your scheme is successful, when you develop quarterbacks over time and that works, you double down on it. You do it again. You sit a guy for a few years until they're ready. If you're Chicago and you've got a solid defense, what do? You double down on it. You trade for Khalil Mack and you have a successful year that year. You find ways to reinforce your strengths. And I think that's a successful way to do it. You keep a good system that kept you a top 10 offense in the league last year, a familiar face in the offense that knows everybody that's there, and you bring in a guy that reinforces arguably your biggest strength on offense, which is your wide receivers.
I bring this up, Zach, because by promoting Kubiak, which, I mean, give or take, I don't know if I love it or hate it. I just think it kind of smells of a little nepotism, and I'm not a big fan of that. But and glad for Huck to make his first appearance on the pod of the day. That's really good to have Huck around. That's awesome. Anyway,
my question, to be heard, man.
He got to be heard.
He is going wild on the floor.
We got to get him a mic. He's got a lot of hot takes. But my thought though is, by promoting Kubiak, does that close the door on these Cousins rumors? Because we've heard a ton of Cousins rumors, a lot of steam about him going to San Francisco, a lot of steam about him maybe being part of another package somewhere else. Does that close the door on this a little bit?
I don't know. I guess for me, the Cousins stuff I never really understood, because what is your plan to replace him?
Right.
And for as much as, some of my friends were excited, they'll go get Watson. Like, with what? Was always my reply. Because their pick right now isn't good enough. And in theory, their future picks aren't going to be that great. So unless you're going to all of a sudden give up 5 first-rounders, I didn't think that was ever realistic. So that's my biggest thing is, who's going to be the quarterback in Minnesota if you don't, unless you just decided to start completely over?
Yeah, I totally agree. I don't think that they had the firepower to go get Watson, even if it was a fantasy for me to have him on the team. I thought that for a while that there was some credence to the San Francisco rumors, that maybe he could end up in the Bay and we would have Jimmy G and their pick. There was a rumor that he could end up in Carolina and we would have Teddy back with their first round pick for Kirk Cousins. The problem is that the Detroit LA deal, it really, like you said, it wrecked the whole market. I think of it like throwing a bucket of ice on the entire quarterback market, right? Everybody's all hot for all these quarterbacks that are available. It's the fantasy running wild. Like, who can we have? And that deal really just iced the whole thing. There's no movement since. And I think that that's a good thing for Minnesota. I think it would have been really easy to pull the trigger on a trade if somebody offered it really fast. But I think having Cousins on the team gives you a good, consistent offensive performance with the system that we have with Kubiak. Even if you feel it's nepotistic, I think it's a good thing to have a quarterback who understands the system that you're running. And he's a top 10 statistical quarterback. He had a really good year last year. Run it back. Do it again. Don't get baited into bad moves just because the market's moving. And I think that that's probably the best thing that could have happened for them was that trade between Detroit and LA.
Yeah, I feel like it just sort of cinched it. Once they saw that market and realized that the price of poker went up for a quarterback, they just decided to, they'd always been rumoring about Kubiak, but it took them a while to make that official. And I just feel like once they saw that Stafford deal, all of a sudden, a day or two later, they approved Kubiak as the OC, and I think that slams the door on the Cousins thing. I think that keeps Cousins here. All right, now, with that being said, if Cousins is off the board, as we move into kind of some off-season storylines here for the latter stages of the pod, there's a lot of stuff out there. They're talking Garoppolo moving. They're talking Teddy. They're talking Tua. They're talking Desean Watson, Sam Darnold. All of these guys are rumored to be potentially on the move.
Also, Marcus Mariota and Derek Carr.
Yeah, even David Carr, I don't think, is on solid ground with Gruden in Las Vegas, right? And so where are we going with all of this? Where does Trubisky end up? How does this play with Wentz and Foles and all this stuff? A lot of quarterback questions. Where do you see some of this carousel stuff going, Ryan? And then I'll go to Zach.
Personally, I think a lot of this is much ado about nothing. I think a lot of this is people sitting around trying to read the tea leaves when there's not a whole lot there. Like I said, I think this deal between LA and Detroit really threw a bucket of ice on the whole market. I really don't think there's going to be a whole lot of movement like people expect. Certainly not to the degree that they expect. You've got Jason La Canfora releasing an article today that says that if Russell Wilson gets traded, he could end up in LA or in Vegas. And it's things like that are driving this. It's a lot of wild speculation, a lot of, where could they end up that drives these rumors. I don't think that a lot of them are going to end up getting traded, and especially not before the draft. You don't know who's going to end up where. I think it's more likely if they get traded, you see it on draft day or after the combine, where we know we have a better idea of where guys are going to fall. Because if a guy like Zach Wilson comes out and has a bad pro day, a bad combine, a bad workout, and he ends up dropping to 7 or 8, no, I don't think that Carolina is going to want to move to get him when you have a veteran who can play and let him sit for a little while. If Justin Fields has a bad day or if there's some kind of red flag with Jamar Chase or something, you're not going to see a lot of movement on these things before these workouts really start to happen. So for me, this feels a lot more like wild speculation than anything real.
Where do you see it, Zach? I mean, I do feel like there's too much smoke for there to not be movement somewhere, to not be a quarterback, a big carousel move at some point. But who's it going to be?
I think that you're going to see one or two, and what it's really going to depend on is if the Watson stuff happens, right? If Watson goes, where does he go? And then you will see maybe one or two other guys shift after that.
Right.
Yeah.
But the problem is, like right now, is you don't want to settle for Wentz if you think you might be in the running for Watson.
And on the flip side of that too, you might have a situation where if Wentz goes first, and the Wentz market is huge, way bigger than we expected, multiple first-round picks kind of thing. If that's the case, and I'm not saying it is, that may completely wipe out any possibility of anybody trading for Watson.
Right. And so that's where there'll be one or two small shifts. And, the interesting thing is how many of these guys in the rookie class can play. Because every day it feels like I'm hearing about another one, right? Now we're at 5 guys. Now we're at 6 guys. Well, there's not going to be a class full of 6 quarterbacks that are going to be NFL starters.
Yeah, McShay has the top 4 picks in the draft right now. I mean, it's early, but McShay has the top 4 picks as quarterbacks right now, and I didn't think that was the case. I thought it was Lawrence and Fields and then everybody else. And now Fields is ranked 4th out of these 4 guys, which is like I don't know where this is all coming from, but I don't know where they're going to go. I mean, that's going to require Matt Ryan to get out of Atlanta. That's going to require the change in New York. That's going to require all kinds of working parts before we get to that situation.
Yeah, and there's just not enough jobs out there for these mid-level guys. Like, okay, so, Mariota or, what's going to happen if the Bears want to add someone with Trubisky? Like, there's not enough jobs for all these people.
Right.
And there's no reason to have 2, average quarterbacks on your team. So it'll be really interesting to see how this all shakes out. And the Combine, I think they announced, is going to be in a different format this year. So how much that influences things, too, will be interesting.
Yeah, didn't I hear that it's going to be 3 regional sites? Like, is kind of how they're doing it or something like that? Ryan is the draft expert. This has to be throwing you completely for a loop that you might get 3 different combines.
Look, I'm excited for it, but to be honest, I'm already working on my list. I've got sleepers. I've got guys that I'm looking for. I have a draft sweetheart already who I really like. He's a guy that most people haven't heard of because he's not a Power 5 guy. He's not even a real bowl series playoff series type guy. He's actually an HBCU guy. That I'm really big on. His name's Quinterio Cole out of Alcorn State. He's a safety. I really like him. He's my top guy right now.
I cannot wait for draft coverage from Ryan. We're going to have lots of that. Just to preview what we're going to be doing in the offseason here, we're going to have some divisional breakdowns. We're going to break maybe 2 divisions a pod. We'll start probably in the NFC, work our way across. Maybe we'll flip that. We'll start in the AFC and work our way across. We'll go team by team. We'll look at needs. We'll look at where their coaching situation, their cap situation, if we can figure that out. We don't even know what the new cap's going to be next year. We're still waiting on some of that, and that's a big variable into all of this too. And then, of course,
I think 181 is the number that I heard.
What is
the preliminary number? The preliminary number I heard was 181.
181. Is that up or down from this year?
That's down from this year, but up from where they thought. They thought it was going to be at 175.
Okay. So it'd be interesting to see what teams have to do to get under the cap, and whether that makes moving some of these quarterbacks with big contract numbers even feasible. So it's going to be a big thing to watch here as we go. Maybe one or two things before we head out about what we're looking forward to here in the next month or two. Something that you see on the horizon that you think will be a telltale sign or a day, a moment, something that you want to see. Zach, what do you want to see?
I'm looking forward to getting back to some normalcy with this season.
Yes.
So I think just like getting to draft and hopefully, we're having it in person instead of like the virtual thing that we had last year, and just getting back to some of that normalcy would be nice. And the reality is, like, we want to see games, right? So whatever the preseason looks like, whatever the off-season workouts look like, we'd be willing to forego some of that. But, hopefully by the start of next year, we're in a regular season.
Yeah, for sure. I'm with you on that. Fans in the game makes a difference. This is the weird season where it's an experiment where we got to see how much home field advantage really matters. I think it matters. I think it really does. Ryan, what are you looking for?
I've got one thing on the horizon right now, and I swear I hope more than anything that I get the chance to do it. September 2nd, Ohio State comes to Minnesota, and my friend Kyle, he's a huge Gophers fan. My buddy Nate, we're going to have the opportunity to actually go and see the game, and I'll actually get to see the Buckeyes live for the first time, which will be so cool if I get the chance to do it. I hope that we're through most of this crap before that. I've had this specific game marked on my calendar for about 3 years. I knew they would be here in 21. And I told my friend that we would be going to that game. So I've been waiting for it for 3 years. I hope we're out of the pandemic by then because, man, it'd be really cool to go.
I got my eye on a number of things. Obviously, I'm with you there. Ryan, that'd be fantastic to have Ohio State here on the opening week of the season. I think that would be a cool thing to watch. And I'm with Zach, too. I would forego some preseason stuff to have an opportunity to just get to the games and have fans in the stands. I think it'll be a really cool thing to watch. I guess the one thing I will keep an eye on over the next month or two is since I'm a Patriots fan too, I got to see what they end up with at quarterback. I got to see how that situation plays itself out. And I wonder what kind of a factor they're going to be. The word on the street was they were going to make a huge offer to Chris Godwin to lure him up there, and that they were going to try to make a move for some kind of quarterback that they could depend on, not named Cam Newton. They've got salary cap money. They got guys opting back in. I want to see what New England does here in the next month or two, and see if they're a team that's going to get back in the mix here in the next year or two, or if they're staring another losing season in the face, and maybe the end of the Belichick run in the next season or two. But I think we'll find a lot about that in the next month or two on New England. So I'm going to pay attention to that.
Yeah, I think you're definitely going to see New England be a factor, right? They may not be the favorite, but they're going to be better than they were this year. In Vegas, they were like, I think 16-1 to win the AFC next year. And that, like, if you look at the current team, that might seem a little too good. But if you look at what they have available to them and what may happen here, that seems that seems like good odds. I think they'll be better than that. So, the other one that was interesting, Ryan, the Colts were 25-1.
Yeah, it's going to be largely dependent on what they have under center next year. And with their cap space, don't be surprised if they throw a huge check at Godwin too. They need another weapon outside.
Right. And I think they're going to find something at quarterback. Yeah. And I just, I mean, obviously it's a running gag here on the pod, but I do think that is a good number for them, for the Colts. Yeah. I would have thought that would be lower.
I gotta say, the other than the Ohio State game, the other thing I'm looking forward to here, and it's a ways out, it's also college football related, that first night whiteout game with fans back in the stadium for Penn State on ESPN, just Saturday night, just the first game back at Happy Valley is going to be, it's going to be sweet. I can't wait. I need this to be done. I need fans back in the stands. I'm itching for college football with fans.
My bold prediction will be Matt Ryan to New England, and Indy could get in on that too. I feel like Indy was barely in on the Stafford thing. You feel like they should be in on the Wentz thing. It would make sense for them to get there. But I think Matty Ice goes somewhere. I think it's either to Indy or it's to New England. That's my bold prediction on that. And I'm with you, Ryan. I don't go to a ton of games, but there's a little part of me that's like, man, there'd be nothing that would excite me more than even in like the summer in July to hang out at Target Field, watch a Twins game outside.
Yes.
I would be in on that to no end. OMG, would that be fantastic. Oh, so good. Some last-minute news and notes before we jump out of here this week. Congratulations, obviously, Manning, first ballot Hall of Famer. Calvin Johnson is in. Charles Woodson in. Those were the three big ones. Drew Pearson, obviously, I think got into as a veteran. But those are the three kind of first ballot guys that got in. So,
did he push off to get into the Hall of Fame this year?
Yeah, I think he pushed off Leroy Butler to get into the Hall of Fame, into that spot.
Yeah, I would say that's probably the case.
Cheat. Just a cheater of epic proportions. Hopefully Leroy Butler gets his day next year, according to Zach. I think that might happen. I know he's going to lobby hard for it this offseason. He's going to lobby the committee and try to get that done. I think that would be terrific. And also, R.I.P. Marty Schottenheimer, one of my favorite coaches in all of football. I know he doesn't have a great playoff record, but some of that's not his fault. Ernest Biner fumbling on the one, that's a bad break. The drive by John Elway. Schottenheimer never gets the credit he deserves. One of the all-time great coaches and one of my favorite coaches. I love those 90s Kansas City Chiefs teams. So, that guy, always one of my favorite dudes of all time. So that's sad. R.I.P. And good luck in the future on that one. I don't know. What more can we say about this season, guys? What a ride to get to this spot. And this offseason, our offseason pod's going to kick ass. But what do we say about this thing? We put a bow on it.
Yeah, it's a great season. Congratulations to the Bucs. I'm glad they enjoyed their celebration today, maskless and reckless, and getting drunk on the boats and nearly losing the Lombardi Trophy in Tampa Bay. And congratulations to them, man. They deserve it.
In fairness, that's par for the course in Florida. I mean, they're not doing anything that they wouldn't normally do in Florida.
Right, exactly. You wouldn't expect anything less.
Certainly not. Zach, final thoughts on this as we put a bow on this season and move to the offseason. The 2021 offseason, or the 2021 season starts after this podcast. What do we say about this one?
I think we learned that the old guys still have got it. Right? Brady looked great. Rodgers looked great. Picked up his MVP award. And apparently is engaged now.
Yeah, to Shailene Woodley. They're going to be off foraging for berries out in California or something this offseason because that's all she does. She's like a crazy vegan type.
Again, par for the course.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like Rodgers' game, although he does kind of like girls with energy. I mean, there's no question about it. And Shailene's got some.
Yeah, and so I think that's the big thing, right? Like those guys can still do it at a high level, and I'm looking forward to seeing it again next year.
Oh, so good, guys. Hey, I want to thank you guys for sitting with me on the pod this year. Going through these weeks has been really, really fun, and I look forward to our off-season discussions. And then obviously we'll be back here next fall again when the season really cranks back up as a group, and we'll be getting after it. Again, you can look forward to our pod in the offseason because we're going to meet up and talk about divisional teams and the draft. When the draft ramps up, Ryan has got a full slate of stuff for the draft when we get closer to that. We're going to work some more college football-related pods in for next year, too, so that Ryan can really flex his college football muscle, especially if we're all playing the new college football video game next year, which we all will, by the way. Thank you, EA Sports, for coming through on us on that one. That was big. I do appreciate you. It's going to be just so awesome. I want to thank you again for listening and subscribing to the podcast, listening to us on Podbean, on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts. Continue to subscribe, continue to share. We really appreciate that listenership. You can also email the show, timpodcast1@yahoo.com. You can also find me on Twitter at Mr. Tim Anderson. Same thing with Instagram. You can find Ryan at Sweet Cane Music, and you can find Zach at Man vs. Game 1. So please make sure you send all of that their way and my way. We would be grateful to you. If not, that'll do it for the podcast this week. Keep your head up. We'll see you next time on the pod.